Hello and welcome to the M is for Mama podcast. I'm your host, Abbie Halberstadt, happy wife, mama to 10, Bible-believing Christian. And on today's episode, we're going to do something really fun that's a little different than a normal podcast episode. And I'll tell you more about that in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about our podcast sponsors. Of course, you know that we love Voetberg Music Academy. And if you're wondering if all that time and money and reminders to your kids to practice their music lessons really are worth it, let me tell you, it always is worth it when you're paying as little as $35 a month. You can use my code MS4Mama20 to get 20% off each month that you're enrolled in Voetberg Music Academy lessons, and you can share those lessons between siblings in all 5 of the musical instruments that they offer lessons in. And the best part is they can do this together in a like-minded community of music lovers. No more isolated lesson practicing. Instead, your students can learn together, practice together, and even join with others in the Voetberg Music Academy community to support each other and encourage each other and cheer each other on. Your kids can even use the Voetberg method to earn rank pins and badges that are mailed to their front door. And if your kids are anything like mine, they love getting encouraging things in the mail. So that would be a great way to spur them on to learn even more. You can learn more about Voetberg Music Academy at the link in my show notes. And also don't forget to use the code MS4Mama20 to get 20% off each month that you're enrolled. I also want to talk to you about our favorite non-traditional healthcare, Christian healthcare ministries. Our family has been with them personally for over 6 years, and they have done a wonderful job of helping alleviate that scary feeling of trying to find the right healthcare for your family. You can customize your needs with their various programs and even get care for as little as $92 a month, as well as know that you are being prayed for and can pray for like-minded believers who want also to have their health needs shared, but in a non-traditional way by other Christians. You can enroll today at chministries.org. Hey friends, so I thought it would be fun to do a version of What Do You Want to Know Wednesday, which is the Q&A that I do on social media every Wednesday, where instead of typing it out in tiny words on a slide, which I will also do on social media, I would give you an option to get the questions that you want answered done so in a conversational form here on the podcast. So this is What Do You Want to Know Wednesday, M is for Mama podcast style. And I'm going to answer a couple of your questions today. And if it goes well, maybe we'll turn this into a regular thing. You guys can send me an email or leave me a review or send up a smoke signal or something to let me know that you enjoy this if you do, and we might make this a regular bit. So the first question that I had submitted that I wanted to address was how to turn the mood of the home around after you've had a bad attitude and it's affected the kids. Well, I wouldn't know anything about this because I've never had a bad attitude and it's never affected my kids. So, I'm kidding. I am so kidding. If you guys were like clicking away from the podcast in a millisecond, I don't blame you. Anybody that says that they've never experienced a time when they've lost their temper or had a bad attitude or, sleep deprivation or whatever it is that we feel like has led to a downer mood in our home or kind of a cloud of anger in our home, or everybody's struggling, everybody's crying, everybody's falling apart. Because we as mamas are the thermostat of our homes, or at least we should be. We should not be the thermometer. We should not be rising and falling with the emotional temperatures of our children or our husband or anyone else that enters our home. The goal should be, as unto the Lord, to maintain a constant and steady, joyful spirit. But remember, I just said that's the goal. That's not always the reality. And there are a lot of factors: postpartum hormones, running late and having too much on your plate, not getting enough sleep, poor choices, our own sinful natures and our selfish desires for things that we're not getting that can contribute to overreacting, reacting in anger, being sulky, passive aggressive, whatever leads to that downer of a mood in your home. We all know what that's like. And so what do we do about it? Well, one, we repent. We acknowledge what we've done as sin. We confess it to the Lord and to the people that we've sinned against, and we ask for forgiveness. And once we've done that, we can leave that sin in the past. We can leave that bad day behind us, and we can take practical steps toward turning it around. And some practical steps I would suggest would be turning on worship music and having a dance session to it, or making cookies while listening to worship music, watching silly videos on your phone of animals. My kids love to watch those, and we're always giggling with the monkeys or the mongooses or lions or whatever are doing, going outside and getting some vitamin D with your kids, going on a family walk, reading a book aloud together, stopping and praying together, and saying scripture together, or memorizing a verse together about controlling your tongue, or taking every thought captive to the lordship of Jesus Christ, or not sinning in your anger. Because sometimes as moms, we do get angry and it's justifiable. We do get angry and it's righteous. We're upset because one of our kids hit another one of our kids, and we are not happy that one of our kids has sinned against another one of our kids. And that is justifiable, but sinning in that anger is not justifiable. And so if we find ourselves in a place where we've crossed that line, we're able to say, I'm sorry, we're going to reset. We're not going to stay here and sit in this. I think one of the number one ways to stay stuck in a bad day, even if you're the perpetuator or you're the reason that it started to be bad, is to wallow in your emotions and to say that because I feel stuck, I will stay stuck. Instead, we always have the choice in Christ's strength to say, I will go forward with the assumption that his power is at work within me to do this thing that I, quote, don't feel like doing, and my emotions can follow. I'm not saying they will follow right away, but they can. And just that confidence that they can change a lot of times is what we need to turn them around. Next question that I wanted to talk about was someone raised the topic of Christian confidence to age gracefully when the norm is Botox, plastic surgery, etc. So I have a podcast called Tools, Not Treasures, where I talk about the concept that our earthly bodies are certainly not throwaways. They are not something that we should treat with disdain. We shouldn't be thinking like, ugh, I'm so sick of, being here on this earth in this janky old body. I just want to go to heaven and be with Jesus. I know that Paul says for me to live as Christ and to die as gain, and that he would happily be with Jesus. And I feel the same way. However, I don't think we're given bodies to despise them. Neither are we given bodies to idolize them. And while I don't necessarily agree that the norm is Botox and fillers and plastic surgery, because all of those things are very expensive and most people can't afford them, we do see enough of this, especially in social media and on TV shows, any kind of media where someone does have the budget to do that and does feel the pressure to have prolonged youthful appearance. We see enough of that it can start to filter into our heads and convince us that it's normal, that this is what most people are doing, that this is what we should be doing. I love what my 16-year-old son Simon says whenever he sees someone that is wearing just kind of the spray painted on makeup and clearly has a lot of work done to their face. He'll say, she looks really pretty, but I think she would be prettier with less makeup and less stuff done. Like I like it when people look like themselves. And so I think that that's one of the best things that we can preach to ourselves. One, that our faces, that our bodies, that our skin, that our legs and our joints and our hair and all those things, those are to be used of the glory of God as tools, not treasures, to be worshiped or hoarded. But also that we can thank God that he made us a certain way, and that it is actually more beautiful to accurately reflect how he made us to be than it is necessarily to try to obscure and completely change who he made us to be. And as a side note, I'm wearing makeup right now. I fixed my hair before I came on this podcast. I changed my shirt. I don't think it's morally wrong or unchristian to have care for our personal appearance. It's when it crosses over into an obsession or an idolization or something that brings fear into our heart that we might change and grow older. And instead of looking at that as a gift, like, hey, I have another year to serve the Lord and to love people well and to reflect his goodness accurately, we're fearful and trying to turn back to what we were before. I had a friend tell me the other day that she saw wisdom and maturity in me that wasn't there 10 years before. And, I'm so grateful for that. But I thought, I hope that continues to be true. I hope in 10 years you could say you have wisdom and maturity that wasn't there before, and not simply that you chose to freeze yourself in time, either physically or mentally. Because I do think that to some extent, the focus on looks and trying to stay 29 or whatever the joke is can also freeze our brains into trying to go back to that period in our life when we felt a certain way or looked a certain way. And it can stunt our spiritual maturity and growth as well. And I don't think we want that. The last thing I would say is that a lot of these procedures are not physically beneficial in the long run, can cause paralysis in the case of Botox because it's a neurotoxin. Fillers can migrate to other parts of your body and cause problems. They can slow down your lymphatic drainage system. Obviously plastic surgery could go very wrong. So we want to be wise and careful also about what we're doing to our physical bodies so that we're not harming them just for the sake of what feels or what the world is telling us is improved physical appearance. Okay, the next question is from someone that wanted to know whether I grew up believing Reformed theology or whether it's something that I learned later. I do currently attend a Reformed Baptist church. I did not grow up Reformed. We kind of had a smorgasbord of denominations that we interacted with. Some charismatic, some Bible church, which is very the opposite of charismatic, some Baptist, some like non-denominational. And we've been at this Reformed Baptist church for about 7 or 8 years, 7 years, I think. And I still actually wouldn't claim the title Reformed because I don't tend to be a title claimer, other than follower of Jesus Christ, Christian. But someone else asked me a question about having more theology content on my podcast. And I am going to have my very kind, very articulate, very smart, and very educated Reformed Baptist pastor come on my podcast soon. So I'll be able to give you a longer answer on that. This is Reformation Month, when Martin Luther nailed the 95 Thesis to the door of the church. And so that's kind of on brand, on theme for the month that we're going to talk about Reformed theology. Because I know you guys I get questions about that all the time. Anytime I mention we're attending a Reformed church, I get lots and lots of questions. So we'll answer that in long form coming up soon. The next one is a question that I get asked all the time, and I always feel like it's an interesting one to me. And it is favorite age gap between your kids, and kind of how you would choose to plan for those gaps. So if you've listened to number 2 podcast on the MS for Mama podcast, you kind of heard about our philosophy of open-handedness with kids and how they came along in the Lord's timing. And if you've listened to my podcast from last week, you know that we would happily have more, but we've experienced a couple of miscarriages in the last couple of years. And my body is not cooperating with that. And so we have never done too much. We've had some periods where we practiced natural family planning for spacing, but we've never done too much to plan when our children came. Very little, honestly, to plan when our children came. And even at times when I was younger and we just had a set of twins and it was kind of like, Lord, it'd be nice if we could have another 3 or 4 months before I got pregnant again. The Lord sometimes said no. And we were, our answer to natural family planning was, this is when I want you to get pregnant. And 2 of those times, both of my sets of twins, I believe I ovulated twice, and we ended up with twins from my ovulating twice. So even when you're following some sort of pattern, even when you're following some sort of, indication from your body's natural cycles, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the quote answer that you were asking for a little more time or whatever. So none of our kids have been planned in the sense that we said we want to be pregnant by next June, or we'd like this big of a gap and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure we have that big of a gap. Or, we're trying for kids starting at this time and seeing when we have them. We've never done any of that. Not once with any of our kids. So I, as a result, do not have a strong opinion on age gaps. We have a 3-year gap between our second and our third because we experienced a miscarriage between the 2 of them. And then we have 4-year-old twins now, and we are not pregnant. So that's, the next biggest gap. Anytime I say this is the next biggest gap, people are like, wait, is that a pregnancy announcement? No, I just mean we don't have any children on the horizon. And we haven't for 4 years, and except for miscarriages. And then we have 2, our first 2 are 18 months apart. And then our number 8, 9, and 10 are 19 months apart. They're our next closest together. Most of the rest of our children are right at the 2-year mark, a little under, a little over. So what I know best is the 2 years apart. I also know the 3 years and the closer together. We've never had any that are a year apart or, and then I guess at this point, if we had any more children, Lord willing, we would know what it was like to have kids that are buckling their own car seats, possibly giving up their naps, wiping their own bottoms, able to get, their own snacks to a very limited degree. And that would be kind of crazy. So all of this long, convoluted kind of background that I'm giving you leading up to answering this question is to let you know that I don't think my brain functions in the capacity to really worry about this question one way or another. I've never planned for it. The Lord has always provided the energy and the capacity that I needed at the time that I needed it. And I never spent even an iota of energy analyzing, do I enjoy this gap more than another gap? It was just more like, it is what it is. But I am a pragmatist, and it is what it is could be a life motto of mine, along with hard is not the same thing as bad, and you just do. So maybe I'm not the best person to ask. I have enjoyed different aspects of different age gaps. It's certainly a little bit easier, I will say, when you've got a child who is a little bit older. Very close together is hard. But at the same time, you also are closer to doing the same things at the same times. You are more likely to have kids that are napping at the same times. There are some benefits to it as well. So convoluted, neutral answer with the undergirding principle being the Lord is sovereign, and I would trust him to give you the children that he has for you and the strength and the capacity to mother them when they come. And then, the wisdom to help them interact well with their siblings. The next question that I wanted to talk about is one that I get a lot. It's worded differently at different times, but it is a common theme. And the way this person worded it is how to be more consistent in parenting, especially when struggling with undermining my authority. Consistency in parenting is quite possibly one of the most important principles that you can practice. Obviously, it's consistency in the right things. We can be consistently angry, or we can be consistently lazy, or we can be consistently lenient, and none of those things are going to do anything other than produce the consistent response that we don't want to them, right? So we're talking about consistency in good things. I'm assuming this parent is asking me about that. And I think it boils down to, one, you just do, and I know that's not helpful, so I will elaborate. But I mean, you don't necessarily analyze how to be consistent. You just be consistent. Two, the way that you do that is you fight the urge to let it go. Now, there are times when I let things go, for sure. There are times when it is not a hill worth dying on. There are times when I have I love the British term knackered. Have you ever heard this term? It's like where you are just worn slap out. When you have a knackered toddler who's missed his nap and is not going to be reasonable, and you are probably going to have to give down on some of your requirements for that toddler because the circumstances require it. Let's acknowledge that and set it aside and assume that we're talking about those times when your situation and your circumstances are ideal enough that you can require X, Y, and Z from your child reasonably, and that you're probably the one that's failing to follow through more than they are. So the first thing would be when you feel that voice in your head that's like, I'm just too tired and I'd rather not. I want you to counter it with, you're going to be even more tired in a week when you still haven't dealt with it, but you have had to fight and argue about the same subject all week long because you didn't stand your ground right now. So that would be my first piece of advice. Tell that voice to take a hike and instead do the thing in the moment that needs doing, because it will pay dividends. The second thing that I would tell you, and maybe it comes even before the first, is you need to know what your hills to die on are. Is it discipline? Is it screen time? Is it what time you want people to get school done if you're a homeschool mom? Is it chores and keeping their rooms clean? It may be a version of all of those things, but very likely there are things in your home that make the most sense to prioritize. Whether it's meal times together or doing things that help to facilitate your family being together because of your husband's work schedule. And that might look like different consistency for you than someone else that is a completely different schedule with their husband being home or not. It might look like bedtime routines that, like in our case, I've talked about our bedtime routines being pretty streamlined. that we just, with the number of kids that we have and the schedule that we have and the homeschooling family interactions that we have through the day, that we don't do just tons of long drawn out bedtime routines. And that is a source of peace and sanity in our home. And we make sure that we are investing during the day. We're not investing at night. It's just not drawn out. I have literally read a book where the man told his readers that bedtime was where they were supposed to be investing all of their energy. And if they did not go from child to child in every room and consistently give them a very long period of individualized one-on-one attention, that they were missing out on the most important interactions of the day. And I am not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you that you have discernment to know which things should be priorities in your home, should be the things that you put at the top of the consistency list. And those are the things that you don't compromise on, unless you find yourself in a situation like I was describing, where requiring, like in Europe, when we were on a long travel day, you better believe my toddlers got more snacks than they normally got. It's because you have to recognize the capacity of your children and have some compassion when they've reached it. And being like, no, this is the only way we do things. These are our priorities. Therefore, we're sticking to them, even though the circumstances are extraordinary. Probably not wise. But the rest of the time, know your family's priorities and be willing to say no to that voice that says, take the ease now and deal with the mess later. Instead, say, do the hard thing now so that there won't be as big of a mess later. That's my encouragement to you. Okay, the next question that we have is one that I get asked all of the time, and I actually do have a podcast on it. Something about filling our kids' love tanks, I think is what it's called. But it says 4 kids in our family and would love more, but fear I'd lose who they are. Thoughts? So my thought is that while this is possible, it's kind of going to be a throwback to what I was saying earlier. We need to trust the Lord that if He has children for us, He will supply all that we need. And that includes the capacity to see them as individuals. I know that there are periods in my life where I have found myself thinking, this particular kid has not gotten as much of my attention recently. Part of it is because he or she is not asking for it as much. But we can't just say they don't seem to need me as much right now as so-and-so or such and such. Instead, we can say, I notice that they're not seeking me out as much. There could be a variety of reasons for that. They could be just rocking along in life, happy to play with siblings, and genuinely don't need as much of my attention. They could be feeling like they need my attention and just aren't capable of expressing it. They could be shy about something or working through something. And so when I think, I haven't done as much with Honor as I have with Theo or Shiloh recently, just by way of example, I can, as a mom, choose that moment to be intentional and say, hey, Honor, you want to play a game of pool? Which Honor loves to play pool. So we go and we play pool, and he is a chatterbox, but he's also pretty easygoing and even-keeled, sweet-natured, cheerful. So he's not going to be the squeaky wheel a lot of times. So you can just go in there and he will tell you his life story. He will ask you questions. He will chatter away to you. And you can have this wonderful moment of connection, or 30 minutes or whatever it is, just because you chose to ask him to do something with you. I can tell you so many specific details about each of my children's personalities, each of their preferences, each of their fears and their struggles. Can I tell you all of them? No mom can. But I know my children inside and out. And it's one, because we spend a ton of time together. And I do believe that there is a myth that is perpetuated by our society that if you have more children, you automatically cannot get to know them in a group setting. You have to have this one-on-one connection all day, every day, or their identity will be lost. You won't be able to know them well. And I actually think that one of the benefits of having lots of kids who interact in groups on a daily basis is you get to observe their personalities as they interact with each other. And then you can pick up little tidbits and store things in your heart to remember about them and pray for about them that they're sharing freely with siblings that they might not turn around and say directly to you. Not because they don't want you to know, but just because they don't realize that in those unguarded moments of fun or even struggle, that they reveal something to you that you can, like I said, treasure up in your heart and either do something about by being intentional with them, or pray for, or use as something to remember as a gift or a treat or a special outing. So I disagree that just because you have multiple siblings, you have a lot of kids, that you can't get to know them well. I had a reader who talked about how she felt like their whole family interactions were so rich that she liked them just as much, if not more, than the individual one-on-one interactions. And she felt like her kids shared more of their true selves sometimes when they were in a group setting. So that would be my encouragement to you, to not automatically assume that just because the world tells you it has to be a one-on-one situation and you'll be too stretched thin if you have more than 4 kids or more than 2 kids or whatever the number that they've thrown out there is, that you can be granted the capacity and you can look at it through eyes of faith, that the Lord can work through that group setting with your kids and their siblings to truly develop rich relationships with them and help you to know their identity well and to love their identity well. Another question that someone asked me was about an event that I just finished speaking at. It was called Share the Arrows. It was hosted by Allie Beth Stuckey, and it had an amazing lineup of speakers. We had Rosaria Butterfield. I actually didn't get to hear most of the speakers, but I had heard most of them before, except Rosaria Butterfield, and I was in the green room waiting to speak when she was speaking, and I got to listen to her on the screen, even though I wasn't in the room. So Rosaria Butterfield, who is fantastic. I encourage you to seek out her resources if you are not familiar with her yet. Elisa Childers, who I've done another event with and been on her podcast and had her on my podcast. She's fantastic as well. Allie Beth Stuckey was there. Francesca Battiselli, whom I call Franny, she's a friend of mine, was leading worship. They had different sponsors that spoke. Carly G in Los Angeles, Candace Cameron Bure did a Q&A later in the day. I didn't get a chance to hear some of these during the end of the day, but it was just an amazing event that was attended by, I believe the final number they said was 4,200 women, which is mind-boggling. And it really, I had not been in an event with that many people in attendance. It was a very, very large venue at a church in Dallas. And it was amazing to just scan the room and see an auditorium full of women who were there to worship Jesus and learn good theology, and such a cool event. So had a fantastic time. They asked me what my high-low buffalo was for it. If you don't know what high-low buffalo is, I've talked about it before. I think I talked about it specifically for our Europe trip that we started doing it there. I can't remember what friends we learned this from. I'm trying to remember, but people have said they've done it because I've talked about it. So if you've never done a high-low buffalo, you tell your high of an experience, your low of an experience, and the buffalo is the weird thing, like the outlier, the thing that you weren't expecting. The high of my experience at speaking events is always the same. It's getting to meet you. It's getting to meet readers. It's getting to talk to them. The low in this particular case was kind of the flip side of that, meaning one caused the other, and that's okay. I didn't get to participate in very much of the event, or listen to many of the speakers. And I was going to say I was looking forward to it, but I knew there was a possibility that I might not get to. And the buffalo is the reason why I didn't get to do that, is that my line was crazy long to talk to people. If there was not an active speaker going, or if it was like in the morning where there was shopping time or lunchtime, or sometimes really when there were speakers going, and then after the event was over at the end of the day, I added it up and I think I spent 6.5 cumulative hours talking to readers and listeners and online friends who came to talk to me. And our shop, Paint and Prose, which if you don't know, I have a shop with my best friend who illustrates my books. Emma's for Mama and Heart Is Not the Same Thing as Bad, and is illustrating my 3rd book as well, which I just turned in the manuscript for last month. And that's coming out in a year, in September 2025. So we have a shop together with my husband. My daughters helped me work the tables. So we were all there just running our rears off the whole day. And we had a line of people waiting to buy books. We sold out of books. I think I took 400 books. I sold out of books. That kind of blew my mind. I knew it could be busy, but the level of busy that it was definitely a buffalo. And my husband was the same way. He was like, "What is going on?" I'm like, "I don't know, but it's great." So I definitely had very tired feet, and you can tell from my voice, I'm still recovering from all the talking to people, but I really, really enjoyed getting to hear your stories, and getting to connect with you and hug your neck and sign your books and pray for you and sell you t-shirts and all the things. It's just fun for me. Oh, and the follow-up question to that was, do I get nervous in talking in front of 4,000 people? I really don't, in the sense that I feel trepidatious or anxious. I think my body has a physiological response. I sweat. I sweat even when I do podcasts, and I'm not even nervous talking to you guys. Somebody's like, Abbie, I did not need to know that. But it's like your body just is like, you're doing something that you don't normally do. And so we're just going to release the hounds. So I noticed when I first sat down and Allie first started asking me questions, I felt at ease. I felt fine, but I noticed my heart rate was definitely elevated. But I did not feel actively nervous or feeling like, nauseous or like I didn't want to be there or I was going to stumble over my words. My husband did say at the end of the Q&A that I did, he was like, man, you were really going. And I said, was I talking too fast? He goes, well, you just kind of kept plowing through. And I said, it's because I had a timer in front of my face. We only had 30 minutes. And so it was counting down. So I've seen various people share clips from my Q&A. And toward the beginning, I tend to speak somewhat quickly, but toward the beginning, I'm speaking more like I'm speaking to you now. And then there was one clip that was shared from my last answer to the last question. And it was in the last 30 seconds. And yeah, I am booking it. So depending on when you heard me, I might have sounded more nervous than not, simply because I was trying to get all of my words in. Also, if you have a question about where you might be able to watch that, I do believe that there is a web stream, a live stream version, and I think it might be saved and accessible after the fact. I hope I'm not lying to you, but you can check that out on the sharethearrows.com, I believe, site. I will have my son put that in the show notes. Hopefully I'm not telling you incorrectly. Another question that I had was how to handle extreme anxiety that is physically manifesting itself in my body after weaning. I actually did not know, believe it or not, that weaning anxiety was a thing. It makes sense. Your hormones are changing and settling. The only time I experienced weaning anxiety was after I weaned Titus and Toby. And they were also the longest that I'd ever fed my babies. So I fed them for 2 years and 9 months. And I had several days where I just felt inexplicably anxious, jittery, anxious. Just felt like my brain was buzzing all the time and I couldn't settle. And I knew it was I recognized it was because my hormones were wackadoodle after feeding babies for almost 3 years. And they needed to regulate. And they did pretty quickly. One thing that I have found that's super helpful is going outside. If you can get vitamin D, if you can get fresh air, if you can get your body moving to take a walk in nature, that helps a lot. Praying prayers of thanksgiving and gratitude and bullet prayers of, Lord, help my brain to calm, help me to think clearly. Please help me to honor you even through my anxiety. Please take my anxious thoughts captive unto you. Those are always really helpful too. And there's also a supplement called, I'm not even going to try the long version, but it's NAC, which can help calm anxiety. And there is a homeopathic as well called Ignatia Amara, that you can just get from Amazon. It's little sugar pills that you stick underneath your tongue. And it also can help with calming anxious feelings. So those might be some practical helps that are NAC is wonderful for your immune system, wonderful for your respiratory health. It's just all around a great supplement to look into if you're interested in that one as well. Another question that I had was about how many pregnancies I have had. I have to think about this. So I have 10 living children. And 2 sets of them are twins. So that's 8 pregnancies. And then I have also miscarried 4 times, including the twin that we lost at 8 weeks to vanishing twin syndrome when I was pregnant with my number 6, who is Theo. So that is 12 pregnancies. Well, that's 11 pregnancies total because the vanishing twin syndrome situation, I was already pregnant with Theo. So it wasn't a separate pregnancy. So I've been pregnant 11 times and have miscarried at 8 weeks with the vanishing twin, 13 weeks. That was my first miscarriage. Very early, 4 weeks. And then I had a delayed miscarriage or a missed miscarriage where I didn't actually miscarry until 11 or 12 weeks, but the baby had died at 6. That's what happened this past summer. And how do you manage pregnancy with littles around. So I have relatively straightforward pregnancies. I don't think that pregnancy as a general rule is something I would label as easy. Um, it's a lot of changes in your body. You are growing an entire human or sometimes two humans. But I have pretty straightforward pregnancies. I'm able to do most things that I could do before with some modifications. I don't get debilitating nausea. I get very tired in the first trimester, but that's pretty normal. Like tired, like fall asleep in the middle of reading a sentence while I'm reading to my kids, tired, and you just feel kind of loopy. Typically for that, I will power nap during my little's nap times. So when I only had small children, I would coordinate all of their nap times. And if you're like, how in the world does that happen? Let's go back to the consistency. For me, having coordinated nap times, so I would have a time of the day when all of my very small children were asleep and did not need my care, was a high priority because I needed to recharge. I needed, if I weren't pregnant, that might be a time when I could get something done that was harder to do when small children were awake. And if I was pregnant or newly postpartum, that's a time when I would lie down with the baby, or I would take a 20 to 30 minute, or sometimes an hour. If I was just exhausted, I would keep sleeping if I had the time, but usually a shorter nap, because there is science behind. I think I've heard the optimal time is like 14 minutes, which may sound insane because many of you are thinking, one, I can't nap with a flip, and two, if I do, it takes me forever to fall asleep. However, I don't have trouble falling asleep. In fact, I feel like I lay my head on a pillow and drop like a stone into unconsciousness. So I would take 20 to 30 minute power naps and then would feel much better afterwards and could usually, go on with my day. I also consistently exercised while pregnant, which may sound a little bit counterintuitive, like, well, wouldn't that wear you out more? Or that sounds like more strain on your body. But I often found that it helped regulate my hormones, give me energy, and give me an endorphin boost that gave me a lot of motivation to get through the rest of the day. And I enjoy exercising. So looking forward to that, and also getting a little break from the kids because they would be in the gym childcare, which is literally on the other side of the room that I'm teaching in. So we're separated by a wall. I know where they are. I'm right beside them. They can come get me if they need me, but I'm getting my exercise in, getting some interaction with adults, and getting some endorphins flowing and getting the energy levels boosted, and also the physical benefits, obviously, while you're pregnant, of exercising are good as well. So those would be the big ones for me. Those may not translate to your lifestyle or your preferences, but those are my answers for that one. Another question I had, and I'm just going to do a couple more. Another question that I have was about our rules for teen dating. So we actually have not had any official teen dating in our house, and I'm kind of surprised because I have two very handsome, very outgoing social boys in my home, Ezra and Simon, and they are very much so interested in getting married. They're very much so interested in the opposite sex, but they have not found anyone that they are interested enough in officially dating to call it the full thing. We've had romances, we've had close friendships, like special friendships. We've had interest that's been expressed, but there's never been any true exclusivity, I would say. And so for my oldest, who is a legal adult, we would just have encouragement for him. We would no longer have absolute guidelines unless it was involving our family home. In that case, the encouragement for him would be that he get to know a young lady in the context of her family and our family. I really think that it is so much easier to see true character and how people, it's kind of like I was talking about with the sibling dynamics. You get to see how they interact with various people, and it actually reveals more of their character to you, not less. And so seeing how a potential love interest interacts with her parents, with her siblings, with you, with your children, your son or daughter that's interested, with their siblings, is a really telling thing. And so my encouragement would be group settings and family interactions to begin with, and have that be the focus. And so that's what we've done. Anybody that they've been interested in has just kind of been someone that our whole family knows, but it's never gone far enough that they were coming over to our house regularly or or anything like that. And but for anybody that's not a legal adult, our guidelines are that it must be a group setting, and that they're not going off by themselves with a person of the opposite sex. And that has been adhered to at this point because it just hasn't ended up being a big issue. But that would be kind of the hard and fast. We're not doing one-on-one dates at night in cars by yourself without groups present, without friends present, until this is a situation where you are old enough and mature enough and wise enough to make godly choices for purity and for safety, and you're looking toward marriage. Because we are definitely conveying to our kids that dating is not some sort of hobby or casual pastime, but that the goal would be to get to know someone as a friend for the purpose of seeing whether they could, if you're interested in them romantically, to see whether they could be someone that you can marry someday. So we'll see how that unfolds in the future, but that's where we are in that path right now. Another fun question that I got asked was about twins. Just for fun, would your twins ever be able to fool you and switch places like the Parent Trap? Or is mama's intuition too strong for identical twin mix-up? So both of our twins are identical. Our girls and our boys are, and they could not fool us at all. So I have heard from people whose twins are so identical that they cannot tell the difference. In fact, I had someone ask me on last week's What Do You Want to Know Wednesday, because they were struggling to tell their twin babies apart. And I've heard of people that will paint like a toenail and then label that person, like they'll paint the toenail with the initial of that twin's name so that they know which one they are. But it's also true that in many cases with identical twins, the second twin who comes out and their sibling has paved the way for them, so to speak, through the birth canal, their faces tend to be a little whiter. This is an actual thing. And it's true of both of our sets of twins, that right through the temple area in their eyes, they have a little bit of a whiter bone structure because it wasn't as constricted coming out of the womb, which is kind of crazy that would make that much of a difference. And it does change their face shape a little bit. And I think once you have lived day in and day out with another human being, you just notice the minutia of their differences, whether it's their facial expressions or their personality or the way their hair parts. So Abbie and Nola are actually mirror image identical twins, which means they have features that are split. You know, you have the one egg that splits into two. And so one got the left dimple and one got the right dimple. Their teeth have come in on opposite sides. One's hair parts to the left, one's hair parts to the right naturally. So I find that really fascinating. So the short answer for our family is that there's no way that our identical twins could fool us because they actually do look different. They are very similar in looks, but not so much so that you can't see the obvious differences. And then, I don't know, their personalities and the way they talk and the way their teeth are and just different things are huge tells for me. So I was about to say, I don't think they could pull it off, but they absolutely could not pull it off. And we're going to end with another fun one. We won't end with anything super heavy, but how do we pick our kids' names? So we don't have a deep theological, I have people that are like, okay, it's got to be a Bible name. And then the middle name has to be from like a great grandparent or a hero of the faith. And I think those are great reasons for picking names. Most of our names are just names that we heard and liked and then made sure that they didn't have anything negative associated with them. Because obviously I don't want to just say, I love the name, Jezebel. I know that the name Jezebel is a problem, because I know who Jezebel is. I didn't have to go research that. I had a friend telling me the other day about someone who had named their daughter someone from the Bible that it wasn't Jezebel, but it was maybe not ideal. And she was like, do I say something? Well, the daughter was already born and already had the name. So I was like, no, we can't say anything at this point. We're just going to have to roll with it. So let's see, Ezra is a biblical name, but, and I was aware that it was a biblical name and that he was a godly man and that he was a role model, but I hadn't really considered it. But I was in an exercise class. I wasn't teaching it. I was taking it many moons ago, probably 22 years ago. I was married, so maybe not 22 years, maybe 19 years ago. And I heard the instructor use the name Ezra about a student in her class. She was a public school teacher as well as a fitness instructor. And she said, and then Ezra did this, that, or the other. And it just clicked in my brain. I was like, I loved hearing that in a sentence. That is such a fun name. That's going to be my boy's name if we have a boy. I might have even been pregnant. I think I'm getting my timeline mixed up, but I was either engaged to be married or I was newly married and pregnant. I can't remember exactly. And so we were convinced, wrongly, mother's intuition is not always right, that our first child was a girl. He was not. That's Ezra. And so the girl name that we had picked out, which we did end up using, was Adelaide. Adelaide is actually a character in the movie Anne of Avonlea, the old one with Megan Follows. And she's never actually in the movie. She's mentioned as the mother of a character named Emmeline, and she's just mentioned in passing, Adelaide Pringle. And I was like, I love the name Adelaide, and it means noble, and it's a beautiful name. And there were lots of Addies at the time that we were considering that name. And I knew I didn't want an Addie, both because of its popularity, but also because my name is Abbie, and it was going to be virtually impossible to tell the difference between those two when shouted in a house or, called out from the back of the car or whatever. So we chose to go with Della, which I absolutely love. And that's her name that we call her on a daily basis, but her full name is Adelaide. And then the rest of them were kind of a combination of, I would hear someone say the name, or like Evangeline, our daughter named Evangeline, that we call Evie. And most people pronounce that name Evangeline or Evangeline. We call her Evangeline, was the friend or the sister of one of my brother's girlfriends. And it's just, again, I heard she mentioned her sister's name and I was like, love that name, storing that in my brain. And it refers to someone who spreads the good news. So obviously a little girl that shares the gospel. That's a great association. Her sister Magnolia whom we call Nola, is a name that I heard a friend say that she had, like a friend and the niece of a friend. Like it was, the sister's cousin's best friend's aunt's dog. I'm kidding. It wasn't a dog, but it was that idea. It was like 7 times removed from even knowing this little girl, but it just pinged in my brain. If I hear a name, I know when I love it. It's kind of like when I see a piece of furniture or a color for a wall, it's just an immediate attraction. And that goes into the bank in my memory. And I remember that name. And so we ended up using both of those. Simon was a name that Sean loved and I liked it too. And so that was a easy one for us. I heard the name Honor, on an episode of Gilmore Girls many, many, many years ago. It was a woman who was named Honor. And I was like, that's a great boy's name. Like, that is strong and has wonderful virtue. And I want to store that name away. And so we ended up using that. Theo, I think, was from the casting credits rolling at the end of an episode of Lost. I'm telling you. I see the name. It appeals to me. It's to me and Sean, but I mean, I'm the one that usually like grabs onto it and it's like, what about this one? And that one just grabbed my attention out of the credits. And I'll do that. I'll watch, like if I've watched a movie in the movie theater, because I don't usually watch credits at my house, but if I'm at a movie theater and the credits are rolling, I'll look at all the names and see if anything jumps out to me. And a lot of times there's some, there are foreign names or names that I don't even know how to pronounce, but sometimes I'll be like, oh, I really like that one. And I'll store it away in my memory bank. And so that's what I did with Theo. His name is Theodore. We call him Theo. Shiloh, I had to fight for that one. It's actually a character from a series by Gilbert Morris. I had read a bunch of the Winslow Chronicles, which is a forever long series. I don't even know how many books are in that series, but by a man named Gilbert Morris when I was a teenager. And he had another series called the Cheney Duval MD series. And I'm sure if I went back and read that series, I would think it was schmaltzy and schmoopy as can be. But I loved it when I was a teenager. And it had a character who was named for the building that he was left at as a baby when someone abandoned him. I think the building was something to do with, it was like an iron forge or something. And it was named Shiloh Iron. And that's his name in the book, Shiloh Irons. And I latched onto that name as a teenager and didn't let it go. But Sean was not a huge fan. So Shiloh is our number 5 boy. We have 7 boys, and Shiloh is our number 5 boy. And I don't usually do this because Sean and I have agreed on all of our names up to that point, but I kind of played listen, one of us actually carries these babies in our bellies. That's me raising my hand over here, and pushes them out of her body. And I really want this name. You said no 4 times before this, and this is the name that I want. And so we went with Shiloh, and it's perfect. I love my little Shiloh. I love that name. And Sean likes it too now. And then Titus was a name that we had heard a friend at church name her little boy, and he was in our nursery class one day when we were doing children's church. And normally I would not name my child the name of someone at church. We don't attend a tiny church, but we don't attend a huge church. And I like unique names, but it just stuck in my brain immediately. Again, I'm already aware there's a book of the Bible named Titus, and it wasn't a name that I was unfamiliar with. However, it had never stuck out to me before until I had this little child in our nursery class, and that one just got stuck in my brain. And then I don't remember where I heard Tobias. I don't remember how that got stuck in my brain, but it wasn't even on the radar because we didn't know we were having another set of twins. So we had the name for Titus picked. We knew we were having a boy because we'd done a blood test. And then we did an early sonogram at like 11 weeks, found out we were having another set of twins. And I was trying to avoid having a TT name. So I didn't want it to be Titus and Timothy or Titus and whatever, because it is fine with me when other people name their twins the same first letter, but I didn't want to do it. I specifically avoided it with Evie and Nola, but I didn't have to try hard because I wasn't that interested in any names that had the same first letters. But the name that I wanted was Tobias, and we were going to name him Asher, which I like as well. And it ended up being his middle name. And I finally, when we were on some sort of trip, and I was quite a bit pregnant, like probably 30 weeks pregnant. So we had been calling him Asher for a while in the womb. And I finally kind of out of the blue said to Sean, I just don't think that, and I almost didn't finish my sentence, I think. And Sean's like, that's his name, that Asher is his name. And I was like, how did you know I was going to say that? He was like, I've just been thinking the same thing. And we had just been reading the book of Judges and talking about Gideon. And he's like, what about Gideon? And I was like, I love Gideon, but I don't love it more than Tobias. What do you think about that? The reason I haven't brought Tobias up is because it has the same letter as Titus. And he said, well, but if we love it, why would we not do it just so that it doesn't have this T and T effect? And I was like, T and T, that's actually kind of cute. And so we went with it, and it's not biblical, and I can't even remember where I first heard it. But there you go. There's a rundown of the kind of random ways that I have had a name stuck in my head that I absolutely love. We really have never gotten any from like a baby list. I'll see them on the baby list and still like them, but I don't think I've ever picked a name from a baby list before. They're just names that I hear in the wild or see in a movie or see in a book and love. And then as long as they have a positive connotation and a good meaning, we go with them. So there you go. There is a Q&A. What do you want to know Wednesday? MS for Mama podcast edition for you. Let me know what you think of this, and maybe we'll give it a go once a month or spread it out and do it once a quarter or something like that. Let me know if you like it, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. If you enjoy the MS for Mama podcast, I would be so honored if you would subscribe and follow along, maybe share with friends or even leave a review. And if you want more content on motherhood and biblical responses to cultural issues, be sure to follow along on Instagram at m.is.for.mama.